I'm going to call this debate to order. And so again, the resolution in front of us is resolved. Government should provide for everyone's most basic needs. And I am looking for a speech in the affirmative of up to 4 minutes. Our first speaker will be Alex Weisenfels. You can unmute yourself and just tell everybody where you're speaking from.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Uh,
Alex. Where are you dialing in from?
oh, physically. Oh, yes. I am located in Madison, Wisconsin.
Wonderful. Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I support universal basic income as a way of providing for people's most basic needs. This policy issues a fixed monthly payment to each person, usually suggested as about $1,000 a month. And this payment is intended to be a net positive payment for people with lower annual income, but it would obviously break even with taxes at some point. People with higher income levels, sometimes suggested to be somewhere around $100,000 per year or higher, depending on the taxes, would still pay taxes on that balance. That's just the basic summary of what the policy is about. And I believe that a universal basic income is necessary, or at least very helpful, for solving many societal problems. And this is because many problems are perpetuated by poverty, including crime, health issues, and poverty itself. And so this would directly address poverty as the root cause of many of those problems. And then with the universal basic income, each individual person will have a guaranteed minimum income that does not go away if they start getting paid decent wages. So that's not only money they can spend on health, nutrition, maintenance for vehicles, electronics, and the occasional indulgences that help make life worth living. It's also an investment in peace of mind, because poverty turns life into a precarious balance where it can be wiped out with one misfortune. With universal basic income, that serves as not just a safety net, but a solid floor to stand on and to build on. However, I don't think that universal basic income is a sufficient solution on its own. We need to add to it. If it's going to be an investment in people, as I regard it, we need some expectation that society gets some kind of return on that investment. Opponents of universal basic income are understandably afraid that it would eliminate incentives to do useful work. So we need to show them that money and laws are not the only ways to incentivize people to maintain the economy and to contribute to society. To address these concerns, we can create a culture where people build identities for themselves that involve helping society deal with fundamental liabilities like scarcity, disaster, stagnation, and conflict. They can develop the skills for addressing these liabilities by learning basic problem-solving skills and calibrating them for contexts that they prefer to work in. And when everyone has A, a foundational education for addressing these problems, and B, meaningful purposes to work towards, they will contribute more value than they use, and universal basic income will remain a social safety net so that people can live with peace of mind. Thank you very much.
All right, with that, I'd like to thank the speaker and open it up for questions. I'm very glad to see some raised hands. And our first questioner for the speaker will be Ethan. Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, Ethan, and let us know where you're from.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm from Northern Virginia. And I promise this is a question. I have a very stable job where I have savings. And when I received the stimulus checks from the COVID bills past couple of years, they went straight into my savings account. Given that governments have limited resources with which to implement programs and spend money, I'm wondering why the speaker thinks that I should receive $1,000 a month.
Great question. So I'm going to give the speaker the floor to answer.
That is a good question. So part of the appeal of a universal basic income as opposed to means tested programs is that it removes the incentive to remain in a position where you need the extra income. If you don't lose that extra income by improving your own situation, then you can continue to build and you'll actually want to build because it can only get better, if that makes sense.
Ethan, satisfied? Great, thank you. I see another question from Alan Falk, who has a hand raised, and I'll allow that. So you go ahead and unmute yourself. Where are you? Oh, Raleigh, North Carolina. I do see that.
I cheated
Welcome.
with that. I learned how to do that a few Zooms ago.
Welcome.
Yes, Raleigh, North Carolina. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to know if the first speaker would care to comment on, does he know of any countries or cities or anything who have tried that experiment and what the results were? And I'd like to draw attention to Switzerland, which I believe tried that some years ago.
Mr.
Thank you.
Weisfels. Thank you.
That is a good question. Offhand, I don't remember the specific locations. I will have to look up Switzerland, though, if that is, because I actually had not heard that about Switzerland. I have heard good results from the places that have used the basic income, although I don't remember specifically where that was. But people have been using it to improve their situations. And I'm assuming that because this is a counterpoint, that this is meant to draw attention to places where it didn't work. So I think it would be helpful to learn more about those situations and why it may not have worked. Sometimes it's just because it doesn't last long enough. People will spend money differently if they know that it's going to stop in 6 months. So is there more detail we can get from that?
I don't have any more detail on it, although some years ago, I know that Switzerland tried that, and after several years, they just disbanded the program because apparently it was not working as planned. So yeah, it's Google. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Now, since we had a real explosion of hands coming up for this question. Usually I allow 2, but I'm gonna go for a third tonight. I saw a hand raised by Indigo, and I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself and just say where you're from, and if you'd like to ask a question for the first speaker.
Thank you. I'm in North Carolina, and my question is about the math. So when you're talking about,
the speaker is talking. I'm just saying, don't address the speaker directly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So my question to the speaker is about the math. When something's at a nationwide level, the price is being set nationwide. So I'm curious why, if we gave everyone $1,000 more, everything wouldn't just become $1,000 more expensive, and we, within a few years, wind up in the same relative positions.
Wow. Good one. Alex, you have the floor.
That is also a good question. And the reason that we would not expect just everything to become inflated and thus work the exact same way is because it does serve as a redistribution. It changes the shape of the economy because the people who did not have, well, let's look at an example here. If you have, so we're assuming that if something is too expensive for people to buy, like toothpaste, for example, let's pretend that would be because there's not enough toothpaste. And so giving more people to buy it would only call attention to the problem of there not being enough toothpaste. But the fact that there's more money available to buy toothpaste will lead people to manufacture more. This is actually this very example is actually one that people have written about. The money that exists will incentivize people to build the infrastructure needed to make more of what we need, as opposed to there's not enough because people can't afford it.
All right, with that, I'd like to I'd like to thank the speaker and the questioners. We're off to a really good start. Jazz hands for them. I'm thankful to all the people who did raise their hands. There are quite a few, and that bodes well. You'll have plenty of opportunities to ask questions and make statements as we go forward. I'm now looking for a speech in the negative. And our next speaker is lined up, and that will be Mike Morton. And I just want to say in advance, we were supposed to have a third speaker. I'm not sure if David Garsh has arrived, and maybe our whips can let me know about that. If he hasn't, then I'm going to open it up to anyone on the floor to step in with an affirmative speech as our third speaker. So just let me know how that is, whips, if you will. I'm going to give the floor to Mike Morton now for
Hey.
up to 4 minutes in the negative.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the first speaker very much. And I'm looking at this from Udall, Kansas. I'm a blue activist in a red state and party official. And I'm not sure we could ever agree on what all those needs, the most basic needs would be, nor do I believe it would be a realistic or sustainable goal. But I think government should provide a secure and safe environment to live and conduct business, provide a fair and accessible legal system to settle disputes and punish serious crime. However, I do believe that it is the interest of everyone to provide access to the opportunities that our capitalist society offers and a realistic safety net for those who find themselves victims of fate, failed ventures, and policies. After all, capitalism is a system that has grown out of human interaction. Our opposition implies, as Democrats, our opposition implies that capitalism can only be interpreted in their vision. And I disagree. I think it's a term coined by Marx, observed and interpreted by Adam Smith. It's a human construct to be shaped to reflect the values and the needs of a modern society through the legislative process. And the opposition wants to conflate communism with socialism to scare the public and deflect from a meaningful discussion as if such concepts were dangerous. I support universal access to continuing education at all levels and a return to a day when the mission of the state college and university and trade school was to serve the people in the community as well as business and profits. A publicly financed nonprofit medical insurance fund, public subsidized childcare for young parents, minimum retirement insurance, now called SSI, food subsidies, access to healthy food. In a modern urban society, people can't just grow enough food and sew their own clothes from their home-raised sheep and cotton like we can on some of our farms. The prevailing idea of the last 40 years has been to privatize everything and make profit the only thing that matters. Profit is not the right motive for everything. I support the idea that human infrastructure is as vital to our national success as the physical infrastructure. Providing everything destroys incentives to take risks and try new ideas that progress our families and society. Giving all citizens access to opportunity and support to try, along with a safety net for those who fall behind, will build a healthy society that does not punish for failure. After all, failure is how we learn and get better. The health of our society is a reflection of the health of the individual citizens. And I would thank you for that chance to speak.
Oh, thank you very much to the speaker. Jazz hands for him. And I'm going to open the floor to questions for the speaker. I see already a hand raised by John Tressiter. You can unmute yourself. Where are you from?
Merced, California.
Wonderful. You can go ahead and ask your
Yeah,
question.
so Mr. Chair, my question for the speaker is that if government should provide basic needs to those who recently lost a job.
Is that your full question, sir?
That's the full question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I would say yes. I say, see, a safety net, I think, is really important. Those things are usually beyond your control. Sometimes it's your own fault, but oftentimes it's economic contraction or something beyond your control. And so that's why I do believe in a strong safety net for people, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Our next questioner I'd like to invite is Ron Lancaster. You're muted, sir. No, we're not hearing you. If you can unmute yourself. Tell you what, if you can figure out how to, there you go. Good, good.
My question is, I thought I had signed up to give a part of this.
Oh, for the blue debate?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's good. That's fine. Well, then I'll invite you to make a speech then. Are you in the affirmative or negative?
Affirmative.
Okay, then we'll put you in,
Okay.
give me a few minutes and I'll move on to some questions for this particular speaker.
All right.
I saw that John Dykers. There you go.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, would you ask the speaker if he would agree that universal basic income is both wildly inflationary and that it does not discourage individual earnings on their own. It doesn't put a damper on you like means tested kelp does.
Is the speaker clear on the question?
Well, I believe you're asking if I would agree with the first speaker. I find his thoughts very provocative, and I don't know that I totally disagree with his approach. I think I'm someone who looks at everything as we should listen to every idea and really talk through it, because I think it's easy to interpret through our own lens and forget that there are many values out there that are equally important, that may not be the same as ours.
Thank you for that. I'm going to invite one further question from Laura Miller.
Okay, I was just wondering about, this is kind of healthcare related, but what about like if somebody needed a life-saving operation and like maybe their insurance wouldn't cover it and they couldn't financially afford it, would the government, would you consider the government, stepping in, to fund that?
Would the speaker consider
Would that be part of that safety net?
Absolutely. See, I guess in my experience here in Kansas, we talk a lot about how to facilitate mom and pop businesses in small towns, things like this. We can't compete for labor when there's only healthcare offered by the big companies in the big cities. I think having access to healthcare for everyone, in other words, a Medicare for all type setup would be good. I'm not sure if the government should actually run it or a nonprofit and the government collect through our taxes. But I think it should be accessible to everyone for basic medical care, because I know so many of my fellow business people that have had to go bankrupt simply because of a medical emergency, and they're hardworking people.
Mm-hmm.
Losing everything for your whole life and being impoverished is just, I don't think that's where I really draw the line. I don't think that's necessary or good for our society.
All right, excellent. I'm going to thank the speaker and questioners. Jazz hands for all of them.
Yes.
So I'm glad to report now, just to make sure, Whips, we don't have David Garsh in the room with us. Can you confirm that? Anyone?
We don't, no.
Okay, so, well, luckily, Ron Lancaster is here to step right in with a speech in the affirmative, so I don't have to kind of try to call on somebody else. Mr. Lancaster, can you unmute yourself? And you have up to 4 minutes to make a speech in the affirmative.
I think can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm from Tucson.
Great.
Sure. I think our government should provide for every citizen's basic needs, including lifetime health care for everybody. But even if we, and meaning the government, could do that, cost would be a problem. What with all the other requirements, foreign and domestic, there are many hands in the same pot. Maybe if we could stop the steal, we could have money to do all of that and not even give up our defense budget. America is the richest and most powerful nation in the world. But because of the enormous complexity of governing such a diverse population, it's hard to keep tabs on all the money. and or should have in its coffers. America is the leader in various kinds of corruption, meaning theft of our government monies. Tax evasion is $1 trillion per year. Stolen unemployment checks, $7 billion a year. Medicare fraud, about $26 billion a year. And get this, $163 billion stolen from the COVID relief fund. The list is almost endless in ways to steal from the government, and the amount is uncountable. Each year it runs into many billions. The United States of America is a sieve. Money is leaking out as fast as it comes in. What are we to think of this? Why are we arguing about red and blue issues when we aren't even in the black? $31 trillion in the red. That's the national debt. That's the national headache and shame. There is a national crime wave that mostly goes unpublished and unpunished. And if the crooks are ever caught, the justice system is so slow and pokey and lenient on white-collar crime that it is well worth the risk. Crooks strike. The system plods. The culprits live in the dark. The courts work in the light. The United States is not only hogtied by its legal system, but almost ungovernable in many areas because we began as 13 colonies with 3 million people. But then we jerry-rigged the Constitution to accommodate 50 states and 330 million people. So the country runs like a jalopy, barely bumping along on platitudes and pablum. We lack the will to stop the steal. We are too deep in our own stubborn ways of thinking. As we are now, we could have lots of neat programs if we could ever stomp out the criminal enterprise that infects America. We don't need more taxes. We need to collect and keep what is due. The trouble is, we have not proved to be a very honest people. Perhaps the whole world's people are a little or a lot dishonest. But here in America, we have a bigger trough. Well, are we a nation of thieves and fools, or as honest and charitable as we portray ourselves? So yes, I want America to be taken care of from cradle to coffin. But our ignorance and our inertia are in the way. Or perhaps the solution lies with our government. If it just had its own money to spend and not have it stolen by tax dodgers, computer hackers, slick crooks, and smart lawyers, we could stop the borrowing if they stopped the stealing. Surely, we could solve all our problems and have money left over for whatever we want. Amen.
All right, you're just eclipsed 4 minutes. Perfect timing. Thanks to the speaker. And I'm glad to see a number of hands raised. Our first hand will be Al Lindsay. And you may unmute yourself and address the chair.
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the speaker how he proposes we catch the thieves and get the money that we're due. I agree totally with his assessment of all the thievery. But for example, when somebody proposes hiring 187,000 new IRS agents or whatever the number was, I don't think I have it right, but that gets a lot of criticism. It's people, I won't say which party it is, but people in one of the parties talk about, well, they're gonna target all the people who make very little, which is not true. That's not what the proposal was. But every time we try to catch the thieves, we get pushback. How are we going to deal with that?
Well, of course we have problems. We're not going to solve this problem. I'm throwing it out there. But we need G-men. We need auditors. wheeling longer jail sentences and faster justice. People, and this is not people on the dole, this is people stealing big money. I mean, it's hard. And that's why our thinking, like if somebody is gonna hire a bunch of tax agents, hey, they're gonna get my money, which I'm cheating, you know. So it is hard. It is not going to be done, but I'm proposing it anyway. If I was king, it would be done.
Very good. I had just seen a hand raised from someone, I think it's Michael Siegel. Do you still have a question? You're very welcome to voice that question, but your hand has gone down. Oh, there you are.
No, it was covered in the previous question and answer. So thank you.
Okay, well, a couple other hands are raised, and I do always favor anyone who hasn't spoken yet, but we do have Alan Falk has a hand raised, so go ahead and unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would propose a question to the speaker that of all the places that he described where money is being stolen or frittered away or whatever, I couldn't find very many in that list that were not already government agencies. So if the government is losing all that money, how come they haven't fixed it?
Well, the answer is that all of this money was stolen from outside. And we are such a cumbersome country with this big, all these people. We just can't get it together to do it. It's not the inside, it's not the corporate, not the government itself stealing from itself. It's other people got their hands in, and they're writing all kinds of graft in their give me some money again, and well, I can't really answer that question, but so I'll just pass on it. It's just I get too worked up. Sorry.
Okay,
May I follow up with on that just a little bit?
What?
I'd like to follow up on that just a little bit.
I'll give you 15, 20 seconds to follow up.
Got it. Okay.
Another question.
In the same sense of your explanation,
His
sir,
explanation.
of his explanation, if a bank is afraid of theft, they hire guards and build a big safe. If the government is losing money, shouldn't the problem, or I'm sorry, the solution begin in their hands?
Yes.
Thank you. And
yes.
why hasn't it?
Well, I can't answer. That's a big question, but people are stealing from it, and I don't know why they're not stopping all the tax cheaters.
You're blaming the thieves.
Let's not interrupt the speaker with that way.
I am blaming the thieves. I'm not blaming the government. I'm blaming them because of inertia and not paying attention and thinking of politics instead of whatever.
I want to give breathing space. Thank you. I want to give breathing space to one further question from Jay Gondra. Where are you zooming in from? You're on mute, Jay. There you go.
Hi. I'm from Naperville, Illinois.
Welcome.
And I guess my question to the speaker would be, as it currently stands, the government has too many problems or hindrances in their way to provide the safety net or universal basic income as it stands. So do you think that it would be, or does the speaker believe that it would be a futile effort to attempt it without fixing problems that the government is facing?
No, I mean, we have a lot of problems, and I don't think the government will even try. I mean, we tried by these hiring all these IRS agents. That's a start. We're going to get a lot more money because of that, even though some people don't like that. But it's going to take a lot of work.
Jay, satisfied?
Yeah, I can go with that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, let's thank the speaker and the questioners. Appreciate that exchange. And I actually have in the docket right now a speaker in the negative who will speak for up to 4 minutes. That's Bill Grady. I'd like to
All
invite
right.
you to unmute yourself, and you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm calling in from Lakewood, California. I know there's a lot of Lakewoods out there, but this is Lakewood, California calling. I believe government should create the conditions where everyone has the opportunity to get a job or to do productive work, but not guarantee that people's basic needs are met, even if they don't work. Doing the latter guarantees that some number of people, including our nation's growing number of drug addicts, will just be lazy and freeload off of working people. And it's a guarantee of not getting the support of working people in both parties for such a program. I do believe in a rising minimum wage and other government aid programs for working people so that those who do work can get help with housing, et cetera, if they are unable to purchase those basic needs on their own salary. Thank you.
Well, you're going for the record in the shortest opening speech.
No one ever got criticized for a short speech, right?
Yet there was a lot of content in there embedded in your 39 seconds. So that's good news. And I already do see some hands raised. I'd like to give the floor to Dana Morris Jones. You can unmute and address the chair. You're still muted.
Okay, I tried a number of different ways to unmute. It's not as flexible as usual. So yes, thank you, Bill, for that statement. And I'm largely in agreement with you. And
well, I'd like you to address just the speaker and not
yes,
first name.
Yes, Bill. Yes, I was thanking Bill for a statement.
I'd like to thank the speaker.
I'd like to thank the speaker, and I'd like to ask Bill, given your proposition, how would you go about creating more of an even playing field so that we really can provide incentives and opportunities for everyone to be able to provide for themselves?
The speaker has the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. An even playing field where everyone can provide for themselves. I believe government should take an active role in creating job programs if they are needed. In an ideal world, the private sector would create the majority of jobs. Right now, for instance, I mean, there are plenty of jobs out there for anybody who's able to get them. Now, the problem right now is you could get a job and still not make enough money to have have your basic needs met. And that's where something like the Earned Income Tax Credit or other government assistance programs can come in to help people who are working to close that gap, if you will, between their salary and what is needed to make a decent living. Now, there are other times, our country goes through economic fluctuations. There are other times where the private sector economy is not creating enough jobs for everyone. And that's where I think we as a society need to get to the point, have agreement between both parties that government would step in during those times, which is usually a recession or depression, to infuse the country with spending either on public works programs, education programs, so that jobs are created for everybody who wants one and who needs one.
Thank you for that. I'm going to recognize a further question from Karen Kinney.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the speaker about his perspective on, I like the idea that you're proposing that, government sort of can, fill the gap, fit into situations where where people are working and they're not making enough money to actually take care of themselves at even a basic level. And living in the Northwest where it's extremely expensive, I'm very aware that our area needs to have a much higher minimum wage than what the national one is. Our food, electronic benefit programs for food assistance, healthcare, the federal programs don't recognize differences in regions. And I also was very aware, like during COVID with the payments that were put out, it was flat amounts so that, $600 in one part of the country went a lot farther than $600 in other parts of the country. And so that kind of thinking where there's regional differences doesn't seem to me to be a big part of government program design or anything like that. And so I was wondering what you thought of that, given that the country has so many extremes of incomes and costs of living.
What he thinks of that.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on that. And government should, either at the federal level or localized at the state level, take into account those differences in the cost of living. I'm guessing that in the stimulus program, they wanted to get money out the door as quickly as they could. And you may have read, the IRS is operating on a computer system that in many ways is antiquated, and it had a difficult time. I think they did an amazing job getting the money out as quickly as they did, but to then add on a layer of regional cost of living adjustments, I'm guessing that's why they didn't do that during the stimulus program. It would just overcomplicate things. But when we have time to craft a program that operates in more normal times, I agree with you. I think it needs to be regionally cost adjusted.
Thank you for that. I'm going to recognize one last question for this speaker, and Pan Awesome. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but you can please unmute yourself, and I'm going to give you the floor.
Yes, actually, it's Pan's husband, Carl. I'm registered, but I just sharing her computer.
Okay.
It's been well documented over the years that the minimum wage, which has been held down, the workers have actually lost value over the years. And so they're working for less money than they were in the mid-70s. And the thing that I've never quite understood, and I want to ask the speaker what he thinks about the idea of, as the retirement income that we receive from the government is tied to cost of living. And so consequently, we're looking for an upcharge this next year because of what's happened in the past. It seems that it would be fair to be able to tie that minimum wage to the cost of living index that the government publishes every year, so that we don't have this constant battle of people working for $10 or $12 an hour. To me, we need to get over that hurdle and build that into the economy. It's not the workers who are creating all of this inflation. The workers are just the ones who are suffering from it.
So let's cap off this statement with your exact question. So that
the exact question is, how does the speaker feel about that notion?
Very good.
I agree with it completely, that it should be just like Social Security. It should go up with inflation automatically, so we don't have to have a political battle every time we want to raise the minimum wage. I agree with you on that.
Jazz hands for our speaker and questioners. Got a lot of momentum in this debate, going very, very well. Everyone is doing great here. And actually, I feel good about the fact that I already have another speaker in the docket. But first, jazz hands for all our courageous opening speakers for launching this debate. And I'm going to invite a speech in the affirmative from Reza Jaffe. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Yes, it's Risa. Thank you.
Okay. And after that, some of you can think about making statements in the negative or affirmative, or even in between. So Raisa, I'm going to give you the floor for 4 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I want to ask people to think about how this is framed. Should government cover basic needs? When we frame things as government, it separates it from us. And I propose reframing it instead as, should our tax dollars be used to cover basic needs? And I say yes, with the caveat that there is a lot of systemic change that needs to happen to reduce the burden on taxpayers. So for example, currently there are corporations making huge profits while the employees responsible for creating that profit can't afford to pay for their basic needs. There are so many ways as taxpayers we pay for the impacts of people not having their basic needs met. There are, for example, lots of tax dollars being spent on policing because we've been told that's what keeps us safe. In the city in which I live, there is less crime in the area of the city where the people have more wealth. That's not because there are more police officers there. It's because those people have their basic needs met. We play a costly game of whack-a-mole when police come in and evict people from their home on the streets. The unhoused people move to another spot and the cycle repeats. There are many GoFundMe campaigns to support people in paying for medical needs. The data shows that a single-payer healthcare system would save a lot of money over the years. Many of us would lower costs than what we pay now in combined premiums and out-of-pocket costs while covering those not currently able to get medical care. So I ask us to be thinking about how we reprioritize spending our tax dollars. We don't seem to have a problem spending it on the military and spending it on police. And those things are not really taking care of us. And I ask us to care about each other and community. Thank you.
Jazz hands for our speaker. I actually don't see you on my Zoom screen, but your voice rang powerfully clear. And I have some questions for this speaker. Our first questioner will be Jake Bernberg, followed by Sharon Flynn. So Jake Bernberg, please unmute yourself and address the chair.
Hi. So I want to ask this speaker, and I was a little frustrated I didn't get to ask this of the previous speakers. I want anybody who speaks about this topic to define what they mean by basic needs, because some people think basic needs, I think we all probably have very different ideas of what basic needs means and whether or not the basic needs should be met that really needs to be defined in the question. So I'd like the speaker, and I'd like any future speakers on this one way on either side, to define exactly what they mean by basic needs.
The chair appreciates the question very much. And I would like to invite Ms. Jaffe to respond.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. For me, when I think about it, I think about housing, food, and healthcare as a good starting place.
All right, our next question will be Sharon Flynn.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
There's a speaker.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for the speaker. I just returned from 4.5 years living in Australia, which has Medicare for all. Even the most conservative politicians believe in Medicare for all. There's no homelessness on the streets of the cities that you see in the United States. It's a kinder, gentler, highly wired, redistributive economy. But I paid 48% in taxes in Australia to support that social system and that social safety net. And my question for the speaker, which I gladly paid, even though most of it was investing in the future of Australians rather than myself. So my question for the speaker is more a question for myself. Do we really understand the tax implications of the types of programs that the speaker has mentioned? And it sounds like the speaker is familiar with tax, the very complex tax system, but how much change does the speaker feel like there's actually enough money in the system to actually cover off? Could we do in the United States with Australia, what Australia is doing with the current tax rates that we have in place?
That's a great question. And I'm not sure that, I don't know if we could do it on the current ones. I haven't dug down into the details. I know we spent a lot of money on the military that I don't think is an effective way to spend dollars. But I do know that as a community, and that means everybody who lives here, there's plenty of money to take care of it. And it's interesting, we talk about what percentage of tax dollars, and I ask us to think about it differently. How much money is left to you that's available to you after you've paid your taxes? Because a billionaire could be spending 90% in taxes and still have way more money than probably everybody in this room combined. So I think we get fooled a lot when we look at those percentages. So ask people to think about that differently.
Very good. I had seen a hand raised from Mr. Burns. Did you want to ask a question, Connor?
Mine was already asked, but I do have another question.
Okay. I'll give you the floor then to ask your question.
In terms of, I mean, mine was similar around the tax rate, but in terms of, you know, the reallocation or defunding of certain other governmental budgets, such as military or police, how realistic do you think that would be in order for that policy and budget reduction to actually occur?
How realistic does the speaker believe?
Does the speaker believe would be?
I'm going to ask a question about how realistic is what that we can do that. None of this is, there's not going to be a miracle. None of this is going to happen tomorrow. There's a lot of change that we have to do. And I ask people to go investigate what's happening in your local community, because that's where we have the most influence on how we can start having change.
All right, let's thank the speaker and the questioners. Now I'm looking at our docket. I currently don't see someone who's got a hand up, or at least that I've been alerted to, who wants to make a statement in the negative. And I would like to invite a speech in the negative if anyone has one.
I don't know if there's a problem with the document, Doug, but there are a couple of people on there.
Oh, well, that would be great. I'm sorry. Keep me real here. I'm not seeing.
Yeah, so Ethan Abelman has his hand raised and he's next for the
That's
negative.
why I have these trusty whips to keep me real. You know, I have multiple screens, but the document that you mentioned is not in front of me. So if you have any speakers, put it either in this chat or in the Leap chat, and I'll definitely be able to respond. So our next speaker will be, did you say Ethan?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chandler. So Ethan, I'd like to give you the floor for up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Just a couple things to start off with. First, I just really appreciate what everyone else has said so far, and I agree with almost everything that has been said. And I also appreciate the question, or the really more of a comment about defining what basic needs are, because I think that's important. All that said, it really pains me to be on this side of the debate, and I'm really more neutral. It feels wrong for me to say that government should not provide for folks' most basic needs. And in truth, I do think government should, in an ideal world, provide for our most basic needs. And maybe someday, when I'm much older, I'll be able to say that about our current government. But as we have this conversation, I just wanted to provide a little bit of perspective into one issue that plagues government programs, in addition to the issue of corruption that was raised earlier by a previous speaker, which is just the fact that government is really, really slow and inefficient. And so I work, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have government do things, but I think it's something to keep in mind whenever we ask the government to start doing something new. And I'm particularly talking about the federal government here because that's the perspective that I have. I'm from the DC area. My job involves me being very involved in understanding the way that programs are implemented, and particularly the programs where funds are allocated to state and local governments. And so over the past few years, as an enormous and unprecedented amount of money has flowed out of the government into state and local governments from both the various coronavirus relief bills and also more recently the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and soon to come the Inflation Reduction Act. Implementation is slow and it's a mess. We're approaching the anniversary of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the signing of it. And only just now are awards starting to be announced. The reason is because there's a whole process of you have to, and it's good that the process is there because we want government accountability and transparency. But we have to have the agencies figure out how to implement this relatively undetailed language that Congress wrote at the last minute to get a bill passed. We have to figure out how they're going to do that, how we're going to allocate funds equitably, because Congress doesn't always say, outline all the documentation that needs to happen. There needs to be a heavy audit trail for any government spending, which is good, again, but that's part of the territory when it comes to the government. There's a back and forth between grantees and grantors, because sometimes things need to be clarified. The government needs to release guidance. There's, in many cases, if an entity thinks they're not getting their fair share, they'll have to challenge that, and there's a whole process. In the worst cases, it goes to the courts. But this is just one little slice of, at the end of the day, it is very, very difficult for the government to get things done. And I think what I believe Bill said about, I believe it was, for example, adjusting a minimum wage based on, or unemployment benefits, for example, based on local cost of living adjustment is actually really, really hard administratively. Like every step you add is a whole other headache. So anyway, I just
30 seconds I'll give you, and then you're going to come to a strong finish, and we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah. So what I am saying, the reason why I wanted to give a speech is not to argue about what the government should and shouldn't do, because I believe that the government should do more to help those in need and to provide folks basic needs. But I think in our government and in the United States, we need to be very careful about what we ask our government to do, because we might backfire on us and we'll end up with even more corruption than we expected.
All right, thank you for that. Thanks to the speaker. I do see some questions already, and Emily Holmes will be our first questioner. You may address the chair.
Thank you. I appreciated that. My question, is my audio coming through okay?
Yes, perfectly well.
Great. So my question for the speaker, just listening to you talk about that was
listening to
the speaker and him talk about that was helpful for me. My question is, do you have any concerns about situations where, fast responses are necessary? You talked about,
does the speaker have...
I apologize.
It's okay. I have to do this. It's part of
No, what was it again? Just to make sure I'm getting right.
Just instead of addressing you, just say, does the speaker have?
Does the speaker have thoughts on scenarios where very quick responses are necessary, or does the speaker have concerns about, urgency matters? And I would just appreciate a response on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Go ahead.
Absolutely, and it's very important, and I think that was a major success of United States response to the coronavirus pandemic and the rapid recession that came on. The CARES Act in particular was very effective because it was very fast. But you'll notice that one of the sort of signature pieces of that legislation and in future COVID legislation were the stimulus checks. And as I mentioned in my question to a previous speaker, they were not means tested. Everyone got $12,000, within, I mean, there were some limits, but it was designed to be simple and easy for the IRS to implement, and it was, and that's great. So, when it gets into emergency mode, good, yes, fast and simple. I'm thinking, when I thought about making the speech, I was thinking more in terms of, a proposal for, say, for example, Medicare for all, which I support, by the way. It's going to be really, 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 really hard to do it and to get it right. It's going to take years and years and years. It's going to be the subject of political whims as a result. I've read proposals. They all have problems. I don't even know where to start. And I want to learn what that is, but I just want to sort of bring in the reality check, if that makes sense.
Excellent. We've got a nice little queue of people who want to make speeches, and we're going to kind of make them, a little shorter as we go forward. But I want to allow one further question. I'm going to invite it from Gary McFarland for this speaker, and all you need to do is unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered if, and the speaker has perhaps answered some of my questions, but it sounds like the speaker has quite a bit of experience working with these governmental agencies or programs. And I wonder if there is, the speaker has arrived at any ideas about how to streamline the governmental actions and policies to speed things up, or is that still a work in progress for the speaker? But that was my question.
I think the questioner for that, it's such a good question. And I don't think I have the time to think on it to give the best answer that I could. I think, I think one thing that's always hard is anything that's subject to the whims of politics. Anything that is, one example that I'm thinking of is the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, which I'm a little bit young to fully understand, but I do know that it was implemented as having all these cohesive pieces that were supposed to work together, and then Republicans came into Congress and chipped away pieces of it, of course, chipped away pieces of it, and it is now sort of a fragmented piece of what it's supposed to be. And the result for folks who benefit from that, and the folks who I am most familiar with, are state governments, is that they need to constantly change their procedures. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but I think somehow having a way to keep programs give more programs more continuity, so that they're not just subject to the whims of an executive order striking it down. It's too easy for politics to get involved. I will just say quickly one other thing, Mr. Chair, which is that I do think there is some inherent inefficiency that's important in government work, because you want to have a very strong audit trail. You want to have transparency. You want to have all those things. You want to have public comment periods. So that is important.
With that, I want to thank the speaker and questioners. The pulse in the room is strong. Jazz hands for all of them. And because of that, we're at the, an hour and 15 minutes into the debate. I want to move us forward. I'm going to invite 2 to 3 minute speeches tops now, because I have a whole list of people who would like to come in and make some statements, and that's very welcome indeed. So if I'm correct in my queue here, I'm going to call on Hattie Kerner to make a statement in the affirmative. And after that, I've got a speech in the negative from Indigo, so please stay ready for that. And Hattie, if you're there, please unmute yourself and you will have the floor.
Hi. So I come at this question, I am answering in the affirmative, but with a caveat. I come at this question with 2 unusual personal experiences. One is that I lived in Canada for 4 years, where there is more, I believe that there were more basic needs met by the government. That was my experience. And also, as a child, I had a parent who was unable to work for a significant amount of time. And so my position is in the affirmative, but I think that there needs to be a focus on certain basic needs, especially Medicare for all and fair access to good education in the public schools. And I feel that's something that many Democrats don't discuss enough when they talk about this issue of government responsibility and the need to meet basic needs, is that there are differences in access within the needy people and who deserves their needs met. So for example, now I work in the arts, and there are a lot of people in the arts who are middle class, and so it's easier for them they sometimes register as low income, but because they're educated, it's easier for them to access programs than it is for people who have less education.
All right, and that's your conclusion? So I can open up to questions for you?
Yes.
Thank you. The speaker is thanked. I see a hand raised from John Dykers. Do you have a question for the speaker?
Yes, Mr. Chair. If we could ask the speaker if she would agree or consider that a universal basic income would be less susceptible to fraud and would remove the necessity of the bureaucracy that requires determining whether or not you're eligible for a means-tested payment.
The speaker has the floor.
No, I'm not in favor of basic universal income. I think I have concerns that it would favor people who already, in terms of their respect, it would give people respect who already have respect and are well educated and can speak well for themselves, versus the people who don't have good speaking skills and good education wouldn't be able to make good use of that income.
Very good. I see a hand from Jay Gondra. Please, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I guess my question to the speaker would be, do you believe that government should create more programs to fulfill like basic needs, or just pour more money and more like focus into improving systems like public education as they already exist, and like Medicare for all?
I think Medicare for all is probably the #1 thing I would support, or a single payer system, and I think it works well in Canada. I think education is a bit more complicated, but I think education probably needs some kind of other program, but I don't think we need more programs. I just think we need better run programs.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the speaker and questioners. We're moving into slightly shorter speeches and 2 questions max each. to accommodate the number of speakers that want to make speeches here. Our next person on the list will be looking for a speech in the negative from Indigo.
Yes. I'm in the negative on this, the way that it's phrased and the way that I'm defining the terms. And I'm defining it in terms of a change from what we have right now. Should we make a change? And so then I'm thinking of basic needs in terms of things like housing, public education, healthcare, and food. Basically, I'm thinking in terms of things where people don't need to steal in order to eat, which is a biological imperative, have shelter, which is also a biological imperative sometimes of the year, get medicine for their kids, which I'm sure they consider a biological imperative, and then the education, which gives all of this something that they don't just stay in that place of needing those things forever, generation after generation, so that and so this is how I'm defining basic needs. And so I see that we have all of those things in our current structures. And so then the question is, well, if we think that we don't, then we must be defining, I've heard words tonight, enough, reasonable, closing, not the gap, but closing, I forget the term that was used, but basically meaning closing the gap between what would be thriving. And I would not like to see us close that gap. I know in my own life how important it was to be hungry, actually sometimes physically hungry. It was important to me to have a family that if I really got in a hard time, I knew there was a room I could move into. So I never needed government benefits because I could rely on family if I ever really had those basic needs of food, survival needs met. But the important thing was the education. That was the thing I really needed. And I got a quality education. And so when we also talk about this difficulty in this country of 50 states and all these localities, and how do we actually practically do this? We're not doing well at adjusting even just for cost of living. When we get into these more subtle things about how do we give people enough so that they don't need to steal, but not enough so that they don't need to try and bleed and work 7 days a week from sunups to sundown to become someone who has something of value to offer this world, because that's not easy. It took me a decade of desiring to make a contribution, to have anything to give, to have the skills and competency to be valuable to the economy. And so I want people to have that. And to me, I don't see us going to something like basic income or something like that being the solution. I think that would be worse than what we have right now, just practically speaking.
Perfect timing. Thank the speaker for that. And I'm going to open up the questioning docket here with Iris Antman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask the speaker, what about people who don't have family to go to and are homeless? Or what about the idea of not having to work 7 days a week and just contribute to the economy? Is the economy our highest goal, to be able to contribute to the economy? Is that what we think will fulfill our deepest longings?
I appreciate the question. I'll take the second part first because I just forgot the first part. So having to work a lot and contributing to the economy, I think is a great way of keeping score. I'm retired now and I still am incredibly active, but in my 20s, I can be that way now because I have a lifetime of skills. In my 20s, like I needed to be hungry. I needed to need money. Like, even though I had my family to fall back on if I had to, oh, that was your first part of the question. It was like humbling to me. I hated it. Like I only would ask when I was just like, couldn't pay the rent and was about to get evicted, or was at the verge of stealing from stores. When I was going to grocery stores and stealing food, that's when I had to ask for money, right? And for me, pouring myself into making a contribution as my way of life, I do it 7 days a week because it's my life. And I want other people, I've had a fantastic life, and I want other people to be able to be in that situation, to get the kind of satisfaction out of pouring themselves into this world. And I just think, how do we do that? I think if we give too much, there's just such a subtlety to how we have to do it to have them not steal, but not give up either.
Going to recognize a question from Mr. Lindsay.
Unmuting myself.
There you
So
go.
I'm from Texas, and I come from a family of educators. Both my parents and my sister were all lifelong educators. I'm a retired family doctor, so I consider myself an educator too when I was in practice. But the problem with places like Texas is we don't fund our public schools enough. And so that's what I want to raise with the speaker. We need to all be writing letters and calling and advocating for better funding of public schools and more honoring of teachers. We're losing teachers like crazy, and it's understandable. But we need to do better with funding and with honoring teachers.
So can the speaker discern?
I don't really have a question, I guess.
Well, I think there's enough.
Just a comment.
To respond to.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree that, to me, when it comes down to basic needs, the only one that's a difference kind of from what we're already doing is that this education that is so granular that's not really working just because of how it's done, like it's funded by property taxes. I mean, it's just a wacky way fundamentally to do it. And because of that, I think that's the problem. I think that these other ways where we're talking about how we would make changes to the way we're currently supporting people's basic needs, I think if we fixed that one, we wouldn't be in so much trouble with all the others.
Great nimble exchange. Thanks to the speaker and questioners. Let's move on to another brief speech. I have in front of me chatted from one of the whips, and I don't know the last name, but an individual named Robin, speaking in the affirmative. If you're still here.
That could be me, Robin Lofquist.
Robin Lofquist, thank you very much. I'd like to invite you. I think you have a statement in the affirmative.
Yeah, I have a quick comment. A couple of times it's come up the issue of people who are difficult to employ or slackers or won't get jobs if they have universal basic income or other benefits from the government. And I would argue that their basic needs need to be met just as everyone else's are. First of all, in a humanitarian way, are we saying that they should starve to death? I don't think, in many cases at least, the motivation for people to not work is that they just are lazy. I just don't believe that. But more importantly, I think many of these people cost society so much more in the long run by not meeting their basic needs. One example is there have been several studies of homeless people in various cities across the country. And in many cases, when the experiment was to give the people housing, and so much money was saved because they weren't going to the emergency room, they weren't using all these other services. People don't like it because it's not Calvinistic, but that's a good way to do it. And I think we have the same issue with people who have drug addiction, people who have mental health problems. These things are all complicated issues. It's not just I'm stealing because I'm not hungry enough.
Let me invite a few questions for that speaker. I do see a question from John. I don't think you've spoken before, so I'm going to give you the floor to unmute. Where are you
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm in Houston, Texas.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question for the speaker and for others who have spoken in the affirmative, and perhaps even for all of us, is I would suggest, and I feel fairly strongly about this, that there that providing a universal income in the form of money may not be the only thing that's needed. It can help certainly with food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare. But there is another human need that needs to be met and is widely lacking in American society and culture. And that is the need for social support, for humans to be embedded within a group, a social group where they feel supported, loved, valued, accepted, and so on. American society is extremely individualistic. It's the most individualistic society on the planet, perhaps ever.
What would
And
your
humans are
question
not
to the
designed.
speaker be?
Humans are not designed for that. My question for those, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No worries.
My question is, how might we provide for that? Is that something the government can do, or are there other ways? There's a lot of social isolation and alienation. How can we deal with that? Thank you.
I would argue that providing everybody's basic needs, meeting everyone's basic needs would do a lot to bring people out of the outcast situation and bring them into the fold. People avoid homeless people on the street. People avoid people that can't shower. People avoid people who seem to be drug addicted and can't find the services that they need. When people are able to function like everybody else, I think it brings them into the fold. They will have more social interactions with people who are different from themselves, and be able to take some pride in where they are in society and contribute in that sense.
One further question to be recognized with Bill Grady. You can unmute and ask the question to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like from the speaker I think this is such a novel idea in America of providing like a universal income or universal housing, et cetera, even for people who aren't working. And I live in a suburban area of Los Angeles, and the freeway off-ramps are full of encampments of drug-addled, largely drug-addled homeless folks who, there's jobs all around, and yet they prefer, this sort of speaks to the last, one of the last questioners, they prefer the social interaction of their tent community to going in a homeless shelter. They turn down the police. I am involved with the city government where I interact with the police there, and they try over and over to provide service referrals to homeless people, and the homeless people turn them down 95% of the time in order to keep living in these ramshackle homeless encampments where they're with their friends, and they're, a good number of them are on meth or drinking, etc. They get to have their dogs there, so they prefer that sort of dystopian, we'd look at it as dystopian existence, to going to a homeless shelter and getting a job there and working back up the American ladder.
And we move to your question.
Yeah, my question, sorry. Yeah, it was a speech. Let me turn it to a question. I would be really interested in a social safety net program. If somebody can tell me where in America it has been experimented with, giving somebody all of this stuff and seeing if they make more of their life that way than they are in the homeless encampments. If anybody can, if the speaker could steer me in that direction, I would be appreciative.
Can the speaker do that?
I can't give you specific examples. I have read about experiments with universal basic income that were highly successful. People did not throw the money away on liquor and drugs, and made better of their lives. I would say too, though, that none of these things are going to change everybody overnight. People who are homeless, who have been homeless for 5 or 10 years, have a certain way of living that is familiar to them and that feels freer to them. But if they'd been able to get the help they needed, the first night that they were homeless, would things be different?
Jazz hands for the speaker and questioners. We have reached the 90-minute mark. I think we're going to go for another 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and then we're going to go to our debriefing session. I still have a surge of folks who have been put forth who want to make some statements. So I'm going to ask, let's move to, really kind of skew toward 2 minutes if you can, 3 minutes tops. And I have a couple of speakers in the negative. The first one I'd like to call on as Dana Morris Jones. If you could kindly unmute yourself, I believe you have a statement.
Sure, I do. So first of all, I just want to back up real briefly and ask what, I think we all can agree that what we're looking for is not only every individual's well-being, whether that be emotionally, psychologically, physically, financially, but for the well-being of our total society. If that indeed is the goal, then I think I have some experiences that I'm very much in the middle on all of this. I don't know the answers. I only know the questions. How do we get to a society that is good for all of us and good for the whole? I lived in Sweden for a number of years. I went there as a very idealistic 19, 20-year-old, believing that socialism was a wonderful thing. And I left there with a very different set of ideas, because what I'd experienced is that people in my age group had no spark, they had no motivation, they had no energy. They were very accepting of everything that they were being given. They had pretty good lives, but there was definitely something missing compared to what I had experienced in the United States. So that began to change my way of thinking, and I questioned a lot. Again, I haven't come up with any answers, but another thing that shaped me is one of my own children, who for a while had a mental disability and was on disability from the state for quite a long time, I think actually beyond the time when he needed it. And since being off of it, he has found his grounding and found the thing that is his talent and his motivation, and is doing so much better. So as a psychologist also, I believe that people need to be passionate about a purpose, and they need to find something to do that makes them feel worthwhile and valuable and like they're contributing to society. And I worry that if we give too much away, that we rob people of that need for finding their own passion and for taking risks and doing things that aren't easy, but to find a way to express themselves. And I think if we give them too much, we make it too easy for them to not take on that challenge. That's it.
Thank you to that speaker. 2 questions will be recognized. Sharon Flynn will have the floor first, and then Hattie.
Hi, no, people have been asking about this. I just want to point out Denver just launched a universal basic income project with 1,000 homeless families. So if you're interested in that, just was launched, and it's set up with 2 different cohorts, different payments, one $1,000 a month, other cash up front, $500 a month. It's called the Denver Basic Income Project. They're going to run it for the next year to see what happens and the impacts on the families. So everyone was asking for examples. That's one that just started that might be worth tracking. That's all I wanted to share.
Questioners thanked for that great reference point. I'd like to invite Hattie to unmute and address her question to the chair.
My question to the speaker is, what about individuals who are not capable either through, and then that gets into a question of what is capable, but what if through some kind of determination of a test or examples of their ability, they are unable to find work or keep work? What do we do with those?
Sure. Thank you for that question. Absolutely. There needs to be a social net, a social safety net for people who really are not able to care for themselves. Yes, and I do believe that needs to be means tested in some non-aversive way.
Much appreciation for that round of speech and questions. And if I'm reading my messages correctly, I have a brief speech in the affirmative from Jeff Kelson. Mr. Kelson, if you are still here.
Hello.
All right, you're going to have the floor for 2 minutes.
Okay. Hey, having listened to everybody, first thing is I'm gonna start by saying that I like the idea of having the plan. Question is how to have it. We don't have much money for the existing social services programs. They're always getting thin. There's 2 questions. One is how would we arrive at an amount that would be used, since there are so many different disparities around the country as to how much the cost of living is. Various parts of the country have various amounts that they work with, that they live on, that varies, everybody's not the same in what they need. So when it comes to people's basic needs, when it comes to people's basic incomes, how do we even arrive at an amount? Do we arrive at a flat amount? Do we arrive at an amount that reflects the area that a person lives in? Second is, how do we one thing that we know for sure, for granted, is that there are going to be people who cheat on the system. It's going to happen. It happens in every system. There isn't any system that doesn't get cheated on. So we have to allow for the fact that it would happen. There has to be a lot of money accounting for inspectors, money accounting for people investigating cheaters, money invested in all kinds of ways in the system. Now, how do we even go about investing in the system? Is, for one thing, how do we go about putting it into taxes? How do we even go about it? So there's a lot of questions that would have to somehow be addressed to even be able to put together a viable program that would protect anyone. For one thing, we know how the minimum wage system works, and pretty much nobody who has to survive on minimum wage can. Anybody who's on minimum wage pretty much has to have somebody to help them do it. So we know from that system how little people are able to work with. Now, there have been COVID payments that people barely make it on. There are minimum wage payments people barely make it on. How do we even go about creating a system that would accommodate everyone? How do we even go about it? That's the basic question I have. I like the whole idea of a plan, but how would we actually create it? That's what I'm offering.
And we already have a questioner for the speaker. It would be Connor Burns.
Yeah, I'm coming from Charlottesville, Virginia. I guess my kind of response to the speaker would be, and question would be, when we're looking at things like universal income, we're looking at something that's, when Ron talked about kind of like, we're talking about stealing in the billions. When we're talking about universal basic income, we're talking trillions of dollars, and free healthcare and such like that. And I fundamentally agree, these are very big issues that need to be solved. But when we're talking about solving things that are going to cost trillions of dollars, where do you see that money coming from?
In the first place, we already have trillions in debt. We already have social programs that can't put together enough money to stay viable. We already have that going on. So the question is not, how would we deal with the trillions? How would we deal with any viability to the system, given how badly the system works overall now? There are already trillions in question, trillions in debt, trillions being wasted. That's already in place. We already have that going on. So how, if we're in agreement that this plan is one that we would want to have in some way, how would we, given all those realities of all the waste, how would we go about it? I want to have the plan. I'm just not sure how we could possibly go about it.
All right, let's thank that speaker and questioner. We're going to move to a little bit of just a quick lightning round because there's just a couple more people I'd like to get in before we conclude, and I'm going to ask for very brief speeches. I believe if Alan Falk is still here, ready to make a brief statement in the negative, you can have the floor.
Okay, thank you.
No more than 2 minutes.
Yeah, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to make a variety of statements here. I'm going to throw them out mostly as ideas to be chewed on, and I hope not muddy the waters too much, but some thinking points that I think all the speakers and listeners should consider. When you talk about where does the money come from, a lot of people suggest the taxpayers. Well, that's true. And some of them suggest corporations. I'd like to caution the people who like to focus on the corporations by saying the corporations pay taxes, but every tax dollar they give to the government comes from their customers. And in the end, their customers have customers have customers, and the end user is the taxpayer. Whether the corporation is a automaker or chemical plant or you name it, please consider that. The next thing is indexing. Social Security, sure, let's index that. But don't do anything like try to do it in the next 2 years. That's a problem that has taken 40, 50, 60, 80 years to develop, and everyone suggests things to make it go away in 5 years for the next presidential election. That's insanity. Same goes with the retirement age. Index that to life expectancy. Minimum wages, index that to whatever you want. And it has to be phased in like Social Security. Don't do that overnight. Do it over 20, 30 years or 2 generations. And finally, you want to know how to do it in government? I have a proposal for you to consider. I call it Allen's Amendment. Anytime a bill, thank you, you don't know yet. Anytime a bill is ready to be introduced into the House or Senate, state level, country level, whatever, it has to meet several conditions, which I think will solve a lot of things. The first is a really explicit description of what the problem is today that you want to fix. The next is some really good measurements of how big that problem is. How is that problem measured? The next thing is, how long do you think it's going to take to fix it? 5 years, 10 years, 1 week, whatever. Write that into the bill. That is the end point of your solution. The next thing is establish milestones that measure progress toward that solution. If the milestones aren't met, you have a couple of choices. Keep working on it, keep putting money into it, or sunset the bill. And finally, at the end point, if it hasn't been met, the bill sunsets automatically and cannot be reintroduced for 5 or 10 years. Try that with any bill under consideration, and I think it's a wonderful solution.
There's the closing bell for that statement.
Clank.
Thank you very much. And we're going to forego questions and move to, I think I have time for another speaker. Tony Stieber.
Yes, indeed.
Let me know.
Yes, indeed. I'm happy to speak. I've got 2 points. The first one is that I believe that UBI, distributing UBI to almost every person in the country is extremely efficient because we don't have to do all kinds of means testing. But we also already do means testing for everybody in the country, every taxpayer. And we do that through the IRS. Every time you file a tax return, that is in essence a means test. So we distribute UBI with some kind of cost of living adjustment for different areas and recoup that through the tax system, which is means tested, then UBI becomes very viable. And we can eliminate a very complex welfare system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to thank that speaker and really declare that that will be the last speech of the evening. We're close to the top of the hour, and I want to leave the assembled group that remains, which we still have a healthy number of people, to want to close the debate and move from one of our whips, if you would make a motion to bring the debate to a conclusion so that we can move to our debrief. Do I hear someone?
That we conclude the debate.
And will someone second that?
Second.
All right. Here, I'm going to put my gavel down. This is my Braver Angels gavel that they gave me, and I'm going to tap it. We are done with the formal part of our session, and I'm going to immediately move us into a little bit of a debriefing. I think it's important that we kind of talk about what we've experienced. You know, those of you who kept your cameras on, I saw a lot of very focused, concentrated faces listening, even if they didn't speak. And as I said at the beginning, this is the first time I think that Braver Angels has kind of conducted the debate this way, where usually we have reds and blues in the room together, wrestling over divisive topics. And here we had, you know, presumably an entire room of blue participants. There was 120 at the beginning, and quite a while that they lingered. So this piloted something and signals to me something very, very healthy. But I want to get your feelings about this, your sense of how this debate unfolded. Did you feel it was worthwhile to do this? Basically, I'm going to ask you, what did you like about it? What did you learn? And anything else you might want to comment about it. And I'm actually going to feel free to call on people. It's my job to do that. But I do see someone brave enough to start that debrief conversation. Joe Sipigora.
Yeah, I think this is the first time I've ever spoken, and I've gone to lots of Braver Angels workshops. I really appreciated all the speeches and the comments, and I'm kind of in the middle myself. I think we need to be very realistic as to what can be done. Many people in this country don't like the idea of handouts. So we have to, we can't twist their arms. We have to accept that. I would be more inclined to provide services for free that would help in a way underwrite, would cover a lot of the expenses that, we'll say, lower income people incur. For example, automatically free lunches in the schools, automatically more fair housing, just pump it out. And of course, that would be based on income, the housing. Definitely the healthcare is the easiest part in some ways. So, and I love I think it was the speaker Indigo who mentioned education. That is different, but that's a long view, which is really important. I started on welfare for 1 year in high school because we had no money. My father was disabled and very old. I got a master's in mathematics eventually. I'm very comfortable financially. And so the government invested in me for a very short time.
I want to make sure we have enough time for people to.
But it pays off. So my point is that we need to mix it up and make it appealing to most Americans so they would really support it and not, sabotage it.
Your presence here was much appreciated, and it's nice to hear you speaking up for the first time.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I'd like to invite Dana. Tell us what your impressions of the debate were. Were you surprised by something? Did you enjoy it? Did you learn something?
Yes, enjoyed. Yes, surprised. Yes, learned. But particularly appreciative that there's a place for people in the middle to go. Look, as a bridger for my entire life, I'm a facilitator and a mediator. And a purple person, really. I'm looking for someplace in the middle. I'm looking for someplace where people can really honestly say what they think, and we don't have to be hamstrung by the extreme ideologies of either side. So for that reason, I really appreciate the way this format played out, and I'd like to see more of this.
Your comment is much appreciated. Thank you. I see Dorsey Cartwright.
Thank you. I'm Dorsey from Austin, Texas. And I was really excited when I saw this event being advertised. I think it's so important that those of us in a certain party or color are leaning left or whatever, that we have a safe place to discuss our differences, what we agree on, what we see differently, and hash that out. You know, since Biden's been in office, some of the most intense conflict occurred between the moderates and the progressives at various times. And so to have a recognition that we're not just a monolithic block, I really applaud this, and I thank you.
So it sounds like, you think maybe we should continue with this kind of debate format just for blues and reds, and there's a lot to learn from it.
You bet.
Great. Ed Wimmers, you got your hand raised?
Yes. So when I saw the topics, both the red topic and the blue topic, I was very excited. And what I was excited about was that they were very specific, like basic needs being met. And the other one was, should only taxpayers vote? And I very much appreciated that. The one thing that I would have liked in this particular debate, if it had been even more precise, which instead of saying basic needs met, universal basic income, because sometimes some of the affirmative speakers sounded like they weren't in favor of it, and sometimes they were. So I was a little unclear sometimes, just what the topic was. So I really liked the fact that it was very specific, and even making it more specific, it would have helped me in listening to the debate. So, that's kind of a, good job being specific, and, I encourage you to be even more specific.
That's much appreciated. And, there's a great deal of rumination that goes on behind the scenes to kind of come to these debates. And I know that question was probably batted back and forth. How specific should we be? How open we should be? It's like there's a case to be made for both approaches. And, you raised that's really important. And we live with those questions when we're organizing these. So thank you for that.
Yeah, if I might just say one other thing quickly, which is that, one of the questions that I sometimes have is, how does immigration play into this? And when it's a specific question like universal basic income, then you can say, does it apply to immigrants or not?
Right.
Whereas when it's more general, it's a little harder to know exactly, what's being talked about. But so I very much, appreciate the specificity, and, keep it up.
The suggestions are much appreciated. Bill Grady.
Yes. I was just impressed. This is my first Better Angels debate, and just impressed at how interesting and productive a debate can be when everybody's being civil with each other. And I'm actually now motivated to take part in one of the red-blue debates. I think I'm scheduled to watch one this Saturday, and or I guess participate like this, and just to see how it goes. I mean, that's sort of one of the big, the big challenge for all of us, is seeing if we can all get along on both sides, not only on our own side, but on both sides. And I'm optimistic after this one. But of course, we're probably an easier crowd to deal with. Hopefully the gap is narrower here than it is going across the aisle, but we'll see.
Thank you for that. Wendy Rodnicki.
Yes, hi. I was just thinking, this is really interesting. It's heartening to hear so many people caring about other people's needs being taken care of, is why I'm blue. But I really enjoyed the people that talked a little bit, as have they done in other Braver Angels debates or conversations, about their own personal history, that why they're saying what they're saying. That I find that's the heart to me of the Braver Angels. And I didn't get as much of that. This is very interesting and very informative, and I really appreciate the people who spoke with their examples and personal examples, because that is what makes me listen and pay attention and not polarize, and really open up to hear, what the people are bringing to this and why, and that's, to me, the heart of Braver Angels. The only comment I would make is encourage more of that. I love that. Thanks.
Tremendous
It was really good.
Tremendous point. I got to tell you how often we try to exhort college students to do that because their tendency is to Google a lot of stuff, research it, write it down on their phone, hold their phone and recite a whole bunch of facts that they research. Meanwhile, what
Well,
do you believe? What's your story? And when they tell their stories, everyone is on the edge of their chair.
yeah.
Listen, it's very
hmm
powerful.
hmm
So, Luke, you've got the floor.
Thanks. I also enjoyed the opportunity to just be in a blue room and do that work of building a blue, more consensus among blues and having the conversations among blues. So thank you for trying this new thing and hosting this. And what stood out to me from this debate was, after listening, that seems like we're looking for a way to forge our character as well as we can and support one another in doing that. And we're kind of talking about what's the best way to support one another going through trials in life and becoming their best self or whatever. So
Dynamite. Thank you. William?
So this is either the first time I'm here or pretty close to the first time I'm here. Jotted down a few things I wanted to run by you. Um, you're looking for input on whether we like the red versus blue, and I do like this red and blue, where you do a separate meeting for red and a separate meeting for blue. So I like that. Take that back to the ranch. However, I would also like an opportunity to sit in on a red, not as a speaker or as a contributor, but just as a viewer, as an observer. So, maybe someday I'll do that. I'll tell a big fat lie and say that I'm red and just sit there and hear what everybody else has to say.
I haven't heard it stated that we would be kicking anyone out if that took
All right,
place. Chandler, is that correct?
that's good. Like I said, I'm new to this. The other thing is, I approach this very skeptically. Like, if everybody's blue, we're all going to be singing like a Gregorian chant in a big monotone. And that wasn't true. So my skepticism was not warranted. There was enough diversity here to make it, actually a diverse conversation. The last point is, one of my takeaways from all of this is the need to divide and conquer. This is such a huge thing. I mean, I heard people talking about the psychology of it, the money of it, the logistics of it, the this of it, and the that of it. And it reminded me of what it must be like in a sausage factory that we call Congress, where they try to make laws. This is the type of a thing that has to be, what analysts do, which is divide and conquer. And take this issue, divide it into multiple pieces and conquer it. It's not just one thing, let's provide a safety net. It's many, many, many things. I think that came out very loudly and very clearly for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, William. We're at the top of the hour. I'm going to give the last word from the gallery to David Wellman, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chandler to make a few closing remarks to bring us home. David, you're muted. There you go.
I just said that was my first time saying anything, but obviously I had to unmute first. I had one question. I had an answer for the gentleman that wanted an example of a universal basic income experiment, Stockton, California, but I don't know how do I get that to him?
Why don't you email it? Chandler, put your email address in the chat, and you could email it. Pick that up in the chat and email your question to him, and we will relay that. Who was the gentleman? Do we know who that was?
Mr. Grady, I think.
Mr. Grady. Well, okay.
Yeah, we can connect you.
Let's connect the two of those people together.
Okay, I didn't know how to do that. And actually, as far as in general, I think the comments sort of hit on something. You have this in a debate format, a very formal debate format, but it actually ends up being a conversation.
That's right.
So it's sort of like, I don't know. Have you thought about how to work that out? I mean,
well, there is a certain, format to this style of debate architected by my colleague Acro Lawson, who has a lifetime of experience in multiple forms of debates. And, we've been doing these debates all over the country and in college settings, hundreds of them with many thousands of people, and it does become very conversational, but there is also, it's just non-confrontational debate, we're not. not trying to one up each other, but really bring each person's truth to the table. And I think everyone really rallied around that tonight. It was a great experience for me personally, and I'm very honored to have been able to share it. I'm thankful to all of you for sticking around and participating, and especially thankful to my whips who were present helping, Emily and Kitty. And now I'd like to just turn it over to my friend Chandler to make a few closing remarks about Braver Angels and invite you all to our next thing, whatever that is. And I look forward to seeing you all around the bend.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. I'll keep my comments super brief because I know we're just past time. I put a handful of things in the chat. So we've got a feedback form that we'd really appreciate if you would click and fill out either now or later to tell us, what you think of what we did if you didn't get a chance to speak just now. We also have the information for our next debate. So it's going to be on October 20th, 2 weeks from today at the same time on Resolve, Vote the Party, Not the Person. This won't be split into red and blue. This will be our normal debate format where we're all in one room. And then we've got some links to support us. You can become a member. If you click that link, you can also volunteer with us. Our debate team, we're always looking for more whips and chairs and things along those lines. So all of that information is down there at the bottom too. Yeah, thank you so much for coming out. We really hope to see you at a future debate in 2 weeks or another one that we have down the line. So thank you so much.